year is 1996. Two games had been made about this cool little pop culture icon star named Duke Nukem. With id Software achieving commercial success with Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, and with this polygonal new Quake on the way, it was decided to go for a first-person shooter. This entry would simply be called Duke Nukem 3 D. It's time to hail to the king, baby, in this review of one of the most iconic first-person shooters ever made.
That's one doomed Space Marine.
As was standard with first-person shooters at the time, Duke 3D is a hybrid type of engine where it uses ray casting to draw out the environment and sprites to represent everything else. Much like Doom, your arsenal starts out with a pistol and a melee attack, in this case Duke's Mighty Boot. You also get the standard shotgun, machine gun, and rocket launcher, but this is where the similarities to Doom's arsenal come to a dead end. Kickstarting Duke's more original weapons is the humble pipe bomb, deceptively simple but very potent. You leave a trap on the ground that you can remote detonate at any time or even pick back up. One awesome little trick is that you can switch back to it after planting one to plant multiple pipe bombs, potentially dozens at a time, which can really lay waste to enemies if you use them well enough. The second trap-type weapon is the trip bomb. This isn't as useful as the pipe bomb since you can't recall it and it actually hurts you, but it has its purpose. You slap it on a wall and a laser emits that blows up if it's triggered. It's more automated in that sense than the pipe bomb, but I'd only really use it if I'm out of ammo for everything else. I'm sure you can make effective use out of it though. Next up is the freeze thrower, a pretty awesome weapon whose projectiles ricochet off the walls and freeze enemies solid. You automatically kick them up close if they're frozen, but even if you're not fast enough and they thaw out, they're reduced to a single hit point, so killing them is pretty easy. Just be careful when you're firing it, as your rounds can hurt you too if they bounce, especially in a mirror. The Devastator is like a micro-missile version of the rocket launcher and quickly fires explosives to rip through enemies, but obviously you want to conserve the ammo since it's rare and it goes through it pretty damn fast. Now I've saved arguably the best for last, the mighty Shrink Ray. You may not think it, but this is arguably the most powerful weapon of the game, as it can potentially one-shot any enemy in the game apart from bosses. As you may imagine, it shrinks enemies to the size of a rat. After this, you just have to run up to them before they regain their size and stomp them into a blood puddle. They can't attack for crap when they're shrunk, but unlike the freeze thrower, they don't lose any health when they're shrunk, so if you aren't fast enough, you just wasted your shot. Given how valuable and rare the ammo is, you definitely don't want to do that, nor do you want to shoot at a mirror unless you want to become a tiny Duke. If you have the Atomic Edition, which you really should in this day and age, you also get the Expander with the Shrink Ray. It does the exact opposite and just bloats them up so they explode. Unlike the Shrink Ray and Freeze Thrower, this is automatic, so you don't have to really do anything, just keep shooting until they pop. And you have plenty of enemies to test these toys out against, don't you worry about that. You start out with a basic assault trooper, pretty weak and frail, and its projectiles can be dodged. Sometimes they'll start out jetpacking, but they're otherwise easy enough to handle. Assault captains are red shirt versions that can also teleport. Beam me up, Scotty. The best part is killing them mid-teleport so they come back dead. Next up is the Pig Cub, a not too subtle reference to cubs being referred to as pigs. They're humans that were mutated into ferocious hogs, and they're armed with shotguns, so don't take them too lightly. If you're lucky, you might get this shotgun and used body armor when you kill them. Pig cops also come riding vehicles, riding recon patrol vehicles or tanks. Recon patrol vehicles are in a predetermined path set similarly to subway trains and will stop to fire on you with assault trooper style blasters. All you gotta do is shoot them out of the sky. Pig cops and tanks are Atomic Edition exclusives and are slightly harder to be taken out as they're more durable and fire rapid shot weapons. If you're really slick, you can hit the self-destruct button behind them, but otherwise use heavy firepower to cut through them. Another enemy is turrets, which can be a pain, but they can't move and are easily stun-locked. Protozoid Slammers look very intimidating, like facehuggers from Alien, but they're complete paper tigers. They latch onto you, but die to basically one shot from anything. Even switching weapons while they're latched on kills them. Just mind the acid pools they sometimes leave behind. They can also be found in eggs that look like the facehuggers' eggs, and you can stop them from hatching if you're fast enough. Amusingly, they'll devour other enemies, making them more of a threat to them than you. Enforcers should feel familiar to anyone who's played Doom 2 and faced the Commandos. They're armed with a chain gun and will sometimes stop to fling their crap at you. You'll want to deal with these sick freaks fast to avoid getting shredded. There are also sharks in some water areas, but they're a low threat and you can easily use a pistol on them. Another enemy that you can commonly find in the water, however, is much more menacing, the octobrain. They can bite and fire brain pulse waves at you. Just generally keep your distance to avoid its fire and pepper it until it's dead. Sentry drones are just spicy D-bags, honing in on you and self-destructing if they get too close. They even explode when you kill them, so just generally stay away from them and shoot them to death with hit scan weapons because they can dodge projectiles. It's pretty easy if you've got the shotgun or the ripper because they can be stun-locked pretty easily. Assault commandos are pretty humorous with their bloated bodies and telling you to suck it down, but they also fire rockets, so deal with them accordingly. Another Atomic Edition exclusive enemy is the Protector Drone. These guys mean business because they're armed with shrink rays. You'll want to use the ripper on them to keep them stun-locked, or otherwise just eliminate them ASAP. The first boss enemy is the Battle Lord, armed with a chain gun and a mortar launcher. He's pretty damn dangerous due to the potential for laying explosive traps in the Spider Mastermind-styled rapid-fire hit-scan gun. As if that wasn't good enough, they can be coded as mini-bosses that don't end the level when you beat them and can be found in the subsequent episodes after you first fight the boss in Episode 1. The Overlord was actually easier to deal with than the Battle Lord, and until World Tour, they only appear in the second episode due to the mini-boss flag being glitched and only giving it one hit point. They do fire missiles, but the most noteworthy thing about it is that amusingly, Duke threatens to rip its head off and drop a big steaming one down its neck. When you beat it, Duke proves he's a man of his word and starts reading the local paper as he drops a big Duke bomb on it. The final boss of the original is the Cycloid Emperor, fittingly taking place in a big football stadium. The N64 version improves this by making it a 3D model and making the stadium itself more elaborate, but the original is pretty damn cool too. It has a variety of attacks from simple rockets to the Octobrain Pulse, and when you beat it, Duke uses its eye as a football and scores a goal, declaring
Game over.
The Atomic expansion brings its own unique alien boss in the form of the Alien Queen, and I think I speak for everyone when I say screw this boss. Seriously, screw this boss and its drone children too. It attacks by zapping the water, and this attack can't really be avoided. Just fire fast and keep your health up by any means necessary. It also hatches protector drones, but you're really better off weaving around them to avoid them and keeping it on the main queen until she finally dies and Duke decides to perform a medical service on it, ending its species seemingly for good. In addition to weapons, you also have items to work with. Unlike Doom, it has inventory items that stick in there. It's not all instant use items. Of course, there's the regular health and armor that's used instantly, but you also have a portable medkit that has 100 points to heal yourself with at any time you want. Roids are what you really want if you're a speedrunner because it amps up your running speed, but the downside is you can't turn it off. It's stuck on until it runs out, so make use of it. There's also a holographic fake of Duke called the Holo Duke you can switch on and off, but what the enemies actually go for it is hit and miss, to put it generously. I never really use it, but maybe someone else can get more use out of it. It'd probably be more helpful in multiplayer against more gullible players. Two of them, the protective boots and scuba gear, activate automatically on hazard surfaces and underwater respectively. Obviously they're there to kick in to prevent you from losing health, and perhaps the most awesome item in the game is the mighty jetpack. The sky's literally the limit as you hover through the sky and use the jump and crouch keys to move up and down. It may not be realistic, but who gives a damn? This is a strong case of convenience strongly overriding realism. You feel in full control. One neat thing is that God Mode also comes with an infinite jetpack if you just want to play around. One neat trick you can do if you need to come down and want to save fuel is shut it off full and then activate it real quick right before you hit the ground and deactivate again. You'll land safely and barely sap any fuel in the process. One of the more unique aspects of Duke 3D compared to Doom is swimmable environments. I actually find it more satisfying to swim in Duke than most other games, since it's basically hovering like jetpack flying, but bluer sound pitches down and you can drown. Apparently the game was also originally going to have outer space areas, which I imagine would have worked the same way, minus the blue and maybe minus the deepening of sound effects. It'd be pretty damn cool to see it work like that, but mute all the sound. Water works like a teleporter to an identical sector elsewhere on the map when you fall into it or crouch into it, with the upper layers sinking you partially to give the illusion of swimming. The game can also make great use of this sometimes to give the illusion of 3D depth, since both above and below the water have their own floor and ceilings. On the subject of 3D depth illusion, the game also has some great tricks to make the world appear more 3D than it actually is. It uses a limited rendering system where unseen sectors aren't drawn. This allows to have sectors above sectors to give the illusions of multiple floors. This also allows to have non-Euclidean geometry, such as a 720-degree turn. Another fake 3D trick is to flatten out sprites to have things like bridges. One thing I find pretty awesome is in the postal level of the Atomic Edition, it combines the two concepts to create the illusion of a conveyor belt suspended in the air with space above and below the little space. Another one of Duke 3D's greatest strengths is the sheer amount of interactivity you can do. You can flip light switches, electrocute yourself on outlets if you're a weirdo, give some bills to the ladies, or even shoot a game of pool. You can even restore health with environmental interactions, drinking water from fountains and hydrants, or just taking a leak to instantly restore 10 health every so often. Unfortunately, unlike 0 Hour, drinking water is a slow process, but it may be worth it if you're hurting for health. Naturally, it also uses key cards and switches like Doom, but Duke 3D manages to have more charm as Duke swipes keys like credit cards and generally unlocks all the doors in the area but uses up the key card in the process. Some user-made levels can actually take advantage of this to use multiples of the same key card color to make multiple locked doors beyond just 3. While you also have teleporters and elevators like in Doom, Duke 3D has a few aces up its sleeve. Teleporters can be silent and elevators can move the ceiling and floor simultaneously in addition to having a form of silent teleporter to add more illusion of 3D depth. You can even hitch a ride on a subway train as the build engine allows horizontally moving sectors, and it's also used to great effect to make things like rotating gears. While not one of the more impressive features, it also has slopes which Doom lacked, although it was apparently considered at one point. Don't worry for all you secret hunters, Duke has a lot of them too. It even has cracks in the walls that can be blasted open with explosives. Earthquakes are a thing as well and can really shape the environment. I really love a game environment that can be completely warped by your actions to become different than it was when you started, and Duke has that in spades. One level even has you nuking a nuclear power plant, and yes, it has a cameo to Homer Simpson's Sector 7G. What I'm trying to say here is that Duke 3D delivers in spades on the gameplay front. It's a great 90s FPS that is just as classic as Doom, and while not nearly as revolutionary, it's got enough improvements in style to really elevate it above its predecessor. The weapons, enemies, and environmental trickery really give it a style all its own.
This tape will self-destruct in 1 second.
Duke 3D is the direct sequel to Duke Nukem 2, as can best be seen in the N64 version's intro. Having just thwarted the right gelatins, Duke's on his way home for a little R&R when his ship is shot down, leading him to swear vengeance against those that would dare to shoot down his ride. The first episode, known as LA Meltdown, which is included in the shareware, has you fighting through the city of LA, shooting at baddies along the way. Making his way through a movie theater in Hollywood in a certain colored light district, Duke finds himself in an alien trap, being sent to death row. Luckily, the aliens don't know what arm straps are, so he casually hops off it and breaks out, finding a submarine. However, things don't go according to plan.
I should have known those alien maggots booby-trapped the sub.
Making his way through a nearby toxin facility, Duke makes his way to the California fault line and into an alien ship, where he faces the Battle Lord and introduces himself.
I'm Duke Nukem, and I'm coming to get the rest of you alien bastards.
He learns that the aliens are abducting the women to impregnate, sending him into a rage.
Nobody steals our chicks and lives.
Fighting through a moon base, he faces the Overlord, lets loose a deuce that I can only assume he's been holding in since the start of the game, since he never does it in the toilets, and learns the Cycloid Emperor is responsible for the invasion. Returning to Earth and fighting through Shrapnel City, including through the office of id Software, Duke finally confronts the Cycloid Emperor and scores a touchdown. Since Duke's the king, plays football, and was in space at one point, he's now officially a football-playing king in space. Of course, it's still not over yet, because in the 4th episode, The Birth, it seems the aliens are back to their impregnating shenanigans and Duke must take out the queen, proving the queen is no match for the king. That's essentially the end of the story, unless you want to get into the other expansions where Duke saves the president, saves Santa Claus, and beats the aliens down in a tropical paradise. While Duke is obviously a 90s FPS where story doesn't really matter all that much, it's also a lot more plot heavy than something like Doom and uses cutscenes in more realistic locations to give a greater sense of context. While the levels are largely disjointed, it does generally link the levels up, like the lead up into Death Row, the submarine, and Hotel Hell leading into the elevator of the Cycloid Emperor. The plot does exactly what it needs to do, and it's neat to see it lead from one event to the other. It's a very tongue-in-cheek story with some surprisingly dark elements underneath the surface, but we'll get to that in a second.
Come on in!
Damn, that was annoying.
Duke 3D is based on Ken Silverman's build engine, and while not technically the first game to use it, is arguably the one that put it on the map, so to speak. One thing you'll notice right away is that Duke 3D uses much more believable environments than other games around that time that tended to be very abstract locations. One major thing Duke 3D brought to the table from a visual perspective is treating each surface like a completely different object. What I mean is that unlike Doom, which was sector-based and had sector lighting accordingly, Duke 3D could independently shade and even color individual walls, floors, and ceilings. It can also use any texture for any surface and even technically make them parallax, although you obviously want to use it for sky textures to avoid it looking fugly. Another nice thing is that its low-tag and high-tag system allowed time sequence effects. One great example of this is in the emergency lights that seem to pulse around a sector by simply brightening and dimming each slice on a timer. This timer can also be used for all kinds of events, such as timing up explosions with a falling floor to simulate demolishing a building. It also allows things like a door opening and giving the illusion of light from one side lighting up the other side. There's also a pseudo-shadow system for actors, which use sprites along the ground. There's also night vision, which interestingly enough, green tones the world up a bit and brightens up enemies. While it's not as impressive on a technical perspective, it's worth mentioning. It's little touches like that that really help the world feel alive. Another handy departure from the original Doom's engine is that Duke 3D can stretch and shrink textures and sprites. This is obviously most seen in the Shrieker and Expander, but it also helps that dynamic feeling of the engine I mentioned earlier. Another very noteworthy effect includes security cam footage that can be viewed through it at full resolution or casted on the screen's texture at a reduced resolution. And did I mention this 1990s game even has mirrors? Now obviously they're not made with advanced shader effects, it just uses a dummy sector with cloned environments and objects, but this is a mirror effect in 1996. I don't care how they did it, that is pretty damn awesome for its time. Of course, one of the better known aspects of Duke 3D is that it's positively full of pop culture references. Whether it's Butthead remarking they're closed with the accompanying fried worms experiment, writing that says pick up Bart in the mirror, lettering with Jenny's number, or Luke hanging up in the Wampus cave, it's no stranger. This actually isn't something new in the series. Even the original Duke Nukem was a parody action star and referenced Oprah Winfrey. The little winks and nods go a long way towards giving this game a very laid-back feeling most of the time. Of course, Duke 3D is also no slouch in the audio department. Grab Bag is one of the most iconic game tunes of all time, and the music and the levels themselves is also nicely varied for the most part. Like Doom, it isn't afraid to get dreadful for some of its tracks, especially apparent in Pigsty. Actually, everything about that level is dreadful. It's relatively dark in its environments, uses very dark humor like a literal hung jury in the results of a firing squad, and of course the music itself. Speaking of dread, the game also has women in pods or otherwise in captured positions, and you aren't able to rescue them outside of the N64 version. All you can do is either leave them to their fate or put them out of their misery like they beg you to do. Unlike Duke Nukem Forever though, it doesn't feel out of place here, and the game avoids telling certain R-word kinds of jokes. Seriously, that was a little messed up, Forever. The weapons all sound appropriately beefy, and the explosion sound is honestly one of the more satisfying explosion sounds I've ever heard, especially combined with the squishy sound of pasting an enemy. I will forever use Call of Duty's train scene as a case study of anemic explosion sounds, and thankfully Duke 3D is about as far from that as you can possibly get. But of course, I can't forget about the main man of the hour, Duke Nukem himself. Another departure from most first-person shooters of the time is that Duke isn't the strong and silent protagonist. Obviously, I'm not saying that to diss on characters like Doom Guy, but it was really cool at the time to hear a protagonist speak, and Duke's lovably cheesy throughout the game. Well, Duke did have a line in Duke Nukem 2.
I am back.
John St. John is simply the indisputable king of the Duke.
Born to be wild.
In general, Duke definitely took a level in badass from the first two games. It's funny to think about what could have been with the original concept, now dubbed Lame Duke. It was a lot more similar to Doom in the previous Duke Nukem games, and was, for lack of a better term, kinda lame in comparison. They went full-blown action hero cheese, and I think we're all glad they did. Combine that with a very city-orientated and even spicy at times humor all throughout, and Duke's presentation is very memorable to say the least. From a technological standpoint, Duke 3D wasn't the most impressive around. Quake was looming around the corner, showing off its fancy polygons, and 3D Realms knew it, but they weren't afraid because
I ain't afraid of no Quake.
even if it would be outdone on a technological level by Quake, I'd argue that Duke 3D stands the test of time so much better than Quake on a purely aesthetic level. I mean, no offense to Quake, but Badass Action Hero in the City is so much cooler than samey brown castles. It may be a great game to play, but we're talking about presentation, and Duke 3D is the champ in that regard. And hey, if you really want better technical effects, there's always Duke 32's Polymer mode with full 3D models and shader effects. It's a damn good time if you've got an Nvidia card because it doesn't play well with AMD cards for some damn reason. Or if you want something a little lighter, there's always the true 3D mode of the World Tour Edition. What else can I say except that Duke 3D is a great game, although you probably didn't need me to tell you that. This is the game that would become a blueprint for all future Dukes, and for very good reason. It has left its mark in gaming history as a whole. While it wasn't a technological marvel compared to others, it certainly brought enough to the table that it was able to stand on its own, and you can't deny the awesome charm. I won't lie, Duke probably isn't for everyone. He's a macho action hero parody, and those with thin skin probably aren't going to be a big fan of him. For the rest of us, though, there's a lot of fun to be had in this old classic, and I highly recommend paying some respect to the Dukinator if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching this review. It's time to kick ass and review Duke 3D, and I'm all out of review.